Okay. So we will start the second part.
You need me to record tonight?
I'm recording right now.
Okay, all right.
So first thing to say is, again, very good morning. I'm glad we're able to do this together at this time. So there is always a silver lining to any situation, which is not to say that we only look at the silver lining. Yes, you know, all the difficulties and all the, problems that everyone in this world is experiencing right now. Some a lot worse. Most of us are doing, basically well. No issue. If you are here, basically, we have nothing to really complain about. So, in the bigger picture. But that should not be the only view of what's going on, we can also look at what we are able to do despite all the difficulties. And particularly the situation, the condition has allowed us, maybe forced us, maybe allowed us to gather together and do this daily practice and then daily study as well. So this, we should be thankful, or Buddhist talk, Buddhist vocabulary, rejoice for this opportunity. Also, important to take care of yourself right now. Our bodies, the elements, they're kind of delicate. So important to take care of them. Take good care. Slight, change in things can cause, your constitution, to get all kind of sensitive. I'm sort of experiencing this. They are, nothing to do, none of the symptoms of the dreaded virus. Other things, kind of like not being able to sleep well, and then you can feel like blood pressure kind of rising and stuff like that. Maybe eating too much salt, during time of nothing to do at home, you just like wah, 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 keep stuffing your face with snacks. So anyway, yesterday we continued in this section of this book where the Professor Sobish is giving us a brief introduction to who Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon was. So we were in that section. So let's go there now. Page 6, yeah, that's where we were. So to summarize, up to this point, we learned that he, while his birth and into his teenage years, his life was somewhat carefree. I think he was mostly assigned to take care of the family's livestock, animals. Then also from very young age, he actually was already a Dharma practitioner because his father, not mentioned here in Sobish's introduction, but we know that his father was a practitioner of Yamantaka, this deity. So quite known locally as a very good practitioner of Yamantaka. And so he introduced and initiated his son into this practice. But by the time Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon was a teenager and in his late teens, the situation where he came from in that area has deteriorated so that there was several years of famine and not enough food, which even resulted in both his parents dying of starvation. It's a terrible way, to die. Died of starvation. And then eventually his uncle, who was a monk, who was an abbot that he was serving, also died. Then he went on himself to continue his training in the Dharma. He was successful, gained a reputation as someone who was very good at his pujas, puja services that he did on behalf of others who request them. Then he entered into retreat in Vajrayogini and Mahamudra retreat. Then when he came out of retreat, people discovered that he had the power to heal people. He had gained that as a side effect. Then also, people also noticed that whoever tried to harm him or harm his supporters, somehow strange things happened to them, bad things happened to them. So Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon recognized these, even the positive sign of being able to heal others, and what's perhaps kind of an uncomfortable sign of noticing that whenever people try to harm you or take advantage of you, suddenly kind of bad things happen to them. So both of these he saw as obstacles, and he didn't want, this kind of obstacles. So eventually he heard about Pamodrupa in central Tibet, south central Tibet. And so then he traveled to go see Pamodrupa because he felt such an intense connection, simply hearing Pamodrupa's name. So went to Pamodrupa's assembly, and here Professor Sobish tells us that Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon seemed to have this problem of excessive pride. He always felt kind of smug, and he felt that he was better than everyone, and that was his flaw. But it also pointed out in his biography that even though he had that flaw, luckily he was also very quick at recognizing whenever that flaw came up. So he tried his best to quickly kind of apply the antidote. Then he basically spent 30 or so months with Pamodrupa. And Pamodrupa made several announcements about how Jigten Sumgon is going to be his main successor. At that point, Pamodrupa already had 500 very influential disciples who were fully ordained monks, senior monks, monks with their own disciples. But Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon was still a lay person. But nonetheless, Pamodrupa indicated on several occasions that Jigten Sumgon was his main successor. At the passing of Pamodrupa, Jigten Sumgon was given the main task of overseeing all the arrangements for Pamodrupa's funeral. So this does show that it's not just that Pamodrupa thought highly of him, but the community recognized also that this fact. And so Jigten Sumgon took the lead in the arrangements and overseeing the funeral, and also tried to remain at the seat there to anchor that community. But before long, again, he faced obstacles. And so then he left and went into retreat. And this retreat was going to last basically for 7 years. So he left Pamodru area and went into retreat for 7 years. During these 7 years, only he broke his retreat once, somewhere in the middle of this 7 years. And then he went back into retreat. So on page 6 was where we were. At the very bottom of 6 is where we'll continue. Jigten Sumgon also performed fierce breathing, as a result of which he had many good but also terrifying visions. So there's a type of yogic practice in the path of method. The path of method. Yesterday we talked about that basically in the Kagyu family of lineages coming down from Milarepa, there are two sets of the two main sets of practices. One set called the path of liberation, and Taralam, and then the other one, the path of means or methods, called Tablam. Taralam is basically the standard Mahamudra, formless meditation. Tablam is the method, the path of using various ways to induce, to enhance Mahamudra practice. And so one of them is the practice of what's known as fierce breathing. So controlling breath, manipulating breath, and stuff like that. So he said, here it says, and due to doing those types of practices, he had many visions, both good and terrifying. But no matter what appeared, he merely continued his practice. In one of these visions, he saw a naga cured his eye ailment by licking his eye. So at some point, Jigten Sumgon had some kind of eye ailment, and then he saw this terrifying naga, like a cross between a serpent and a dragon, came and licked his eyes. Although he also had many pleasant experiences, such as those in the samadhis of bliss, luminosity, and non-thought. Yesterday I talked about this. So these three states are considered very good signs. The samadhis, the meditative concentration where you experience bliss, you experience luminosity, clarity of mind, and also you experience the subsiding of thoughts. But even though these positive experiences, he understood that such experiences would only keep him tied to samsara, and he felt disgusted by them. So on the one hand, he was careful to remind his students not to get caught up in concepts and ideas that we reach through debate, through arguing, through disputing, all these scholarly endeavors. He says, be careful when you get those fruits, not to be so fixated on them. At the same time, even meditative experiences, he also was very careful to say, it's so easy to get fixated on these temporary experiences that arise, and that you should not be stuck on them. He suffered many hardships and insults again during his travels. People made false accusations. Famine struck places he wanted to visit. He was refused provisions in Pamodru. So even at the seat of his teacher, even though he was sort of the head, people didn't share what they have with him. And due to his ragged appearance, an innkeeper refused to admit him in the middle of the night. So these are some of these experiences that he had. He looked like such a beggar that even at night he was not allowed inside. At that point, his only clothes were rags recovered from a corpse. He just found clothing from a dead body that he sewed together to wear. Having experienced nothing but hunger, suffering, and tribulation everywhere, he returned to his retreat place, but the worst was yet to come. So as I said, during these 7 years, after 3-4 years, he left his retreat and experienced all these things. He went back to his teacher's seat, and people ignored him, people abused him, verbally, physically, beat him for all sorts of reasons. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with jealousy. That the teacher, chose him. So he went back into retreat. During the 4 years of his second retreat in Echong, this place called Echong, a cave, he fell seriously ill with leprosy. So he must have contracted leprosy. During the break in between these 2 periods of retreat. So then when he came back to retreat, so leprosy during that time is basically a death sentence. Much feared, lots of social stigma, and particularly for a religious person, a spiritual practitioner, to get leprosy, people would look down on that and say, you're supposed to be such a great practitioner. And even before, right, he was able to heal people. So there's this, if he was really a healer, if he really had those powers, how come, we'll have this kind of illness? The nature of this forceful disruption of his wholesome practice is explained in the biography. It states, according to an instruction dating back to Shakyamuni Buddha himself, that during the period of degeneration, obstacles arise during practice prior to the arising of siddhis. So apparently somewhere the Buddha taught that said that for practitioners, often on the eve of, when you get near to attainments arising, great obstacles will turn up. So, through the power of virtuous practice, the beginningless habitual traces, so meaning karmic habitual traces from beginningless time, arise as such disruptions as must be purified. So what this means is that, so on the brink of achieving some realization, necessarily big obstacles have to arise, because in a way it's a swift and powerful way to purify a lot of negative karma. A lot of negative karma that needs to be purified from previous lives. If they were to unfold naturally without the power of practice, then the suffering that they bring will be a lot greater and a lot longer stretched out. But through the power of purification and practice, what happens is that right before some kind of attainment is to occur, great obstacles will come. Because they will all sort of, like you could say, the power of your practice is pulling all those negative seeds that cannot be burnt off so easily and would ripen. And you pull them all together and let them ripen really quick right now, right here. And so then if the practitioner knows that, recognizes that, and doesn't give up, doesn't think that this is a negative sign, but understand this to be a necessary and in fact powerful point, and know how to apply the pith instructions, then you can break through to a realization. So Sobish here writes, such disruptions arose for the Buddha himself when at the end of his practice, on the last night before his awakening, he was fiercely attacked by Maras. So we're all quite familiar with that story of how all the Maras arose and gave all sorts of different obstacles, using fear, using temptation, using doubt, all sorts of things, arose on the eve of Siddhartha's waking up as Buddha. So continuing here, having contracted leprosy, Jigten Sumgon felt dejected, ashamed, and a disgrace to his guru. People no longer came to inquire about his health, and wherever he went, they turned away from him in disgust and fobbed him off with small food offerings. So even though he was in retreat, he still had to go out from time to time to beg for some food and provisions. But now it became harder and harder for him to get anything. He finally decided to go to a cave in a very secluded place, wall it up from inside to seal the cave, sort of creating a grave for himself, and practice the transference of consciousness, poa, while dying unnoticed by others. However, when he was about to perform his final prostrations before a statue of Avalokiteshvara, is said to be the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, so this is a direct quote from the biography, he remembered the other sentient beings, and he realized that they were far worse off than he was. And all at once, he became aware of the entire suffering in the 6 realms of existence. Of course, we know this. And I'm sure he knew that, But in his state of being so disappointed, dejected, he became just focused on his own self and think, I just want to go poa now to the Pure Land and leave this all behind. And in that moment, great compassion arose in him. It hit him really strongly, If I myself, someone who has done so much practice, who have received so many wonderful instructions, if I myself even, now only think of myself, how much more, all the beings in samsara, how much more they are trapped in their own suffering, in their own confusion. And so then great compassion arose for all beings in the 6 realms. Overwhelming compassion seized him, and tears streamed down his face. Over and over again he prayed, may I become a guardian, refuge, protector, and succor for all sentient beings. Almost words from Shantideva's Bodhisattva. At that moment, he perceived how the illness that had befallen him slithered its way down and out at the soles of his feet. His biography said that they left him in the form of nagas. And this is because in his time, people believed that nagas and a lot of skin and blood diseases, stuff like that, is caused by naga spirits. So you could think of it as, the Tibetans' understanding of contagion, or virus, or bacteria, and illnesses. And this is the way they express, contagion. So leprosy was contagion in the form of nagas, these serpent spirits. So in that moment, in his moment of great compassion, in his moment of true and authentic compassion for all beings, that caused the nagas to slither away from the soles of his feet. Moving like a snake. So, healed and strengthened, Jigten Sumgon continued his retreat, and in a state of non-dual luminosity, he completely removed all impurities of meditative equipoise and of the aftermath state dwelt as the Mahavajradhara. Biography is unclear whether when he saw the vision of the Nagas disappearing and that immediately after that he achieved the state of Mahavajradhara, which means the great Vajradhara, which is a secret mantra way of saying achieving Buddha. But it seems more like a period of time after that. So he trained, continued in the state of luminosity, and then he removed the impurities of meditative equipoise, the samadhis that was mentioned earlier. He experienced bliss, he experienced clarity, he experienced absence of thought. These are still samsaric states of samadhi that needs to be purified. And so it says that now finally all those are purified. So continuing in this way for 2 more years, the second retreat lasted a total of 7 years. During this time, he deepened his understanding of outer, inner, and secret dependent origination. So this is, in his biography, he says this quote. I saw completely how, concerning the manifold outer world that is the container, from these causes that arises, how, so the container that arises from these causes, how concerning all sentient beings that are the inner essence of the world, from these causes that arises, how outer material substances yield this and that, how the various inner thoughts yield this and that reality, and how through the secret, the dependent origination of body, faults and qualities are brought forth. In other words, the outer, inner, and secret levels all are interdependent, and he saw clearly how secret levels of confusion and clarity result respectively in samsara and nirvana on the inner level and then on the outer level, producing the external world in which we inhabit. All of that completely, the causes and conditions, the interdependencies became crystal clear for him. He also repeated many times, quote, I understood that emptiness appears as cause and result. Precisely, this is my special teaching. Precisely, this is my special teaching. It is said that towards the end of his life, there was, in one of these recorded instructions, he said, I have always maintained that I do not have a special tenet. Because it's very common for everyone, every great master and then their disciples to say, oh, our special tenet, our special doctrine, our special position, our special standpoint is this or that. So there was this expectation like, oh, your teacher, people would ask the disciples of Jigten Sumgon, what is the tenet? What is the doctrine of your teacher who has so many disciples? What is the special tenet? So towards the end of his life, Jigten Sumgon said, he said, I have maintained, all this time, I do not have tenet. I do not have this. But, he says, but if you keep insisting that I say something, if you keep insisting that I say something about what is my special tenet, what is the special position, then he says, then if you want to insist on that, then know that my position is that this line, that emptiness appears as cause and result. I'm trying to look for that exact quote. Let me see if I can find it.
I think it's on page 8.
No, there's a more specific quote
Okay.
from that teaching where he said, I do not have any tenet, but if you keep insisting, then you tell people this. Actually, on the cover of or the page before the table of contents of this book, Professor Sobish has this 2 quotes from Jigten Sumgon. This is not the one I'm looking for, but this is also good. He says, if you do not understand that whatever pleasure and pain appears as your own mind, you remain as an outsider to this teaching. If you wish to secure benefit and happiness, strive to purify your own mind. So this is related. But there's another occasion towards the end of his life. He says, if you keep insisting, that I say something, or if other people keep insisting, you have to say something about what is the specialty that I teach, then you tell them, first, he insists that there is no special position that he stands on, but if you insist that we say something about the special position that he stands on, then he stands on the position that emptiness arises as cause and effect. This is a very loaded statement and a lot of nuances too. And we will see, in the rest of these 100 and close to 197 statements. In a way, it's all based on this theme. Yeah. Subsequent to this retreat, his time of benefiting others began. In 1177, at the age of 35, he took full ordination. Age of 35 was also the age that Buddha Shakyamuni achieved Buddhahood. He left his palace at 29, practiced for 6 years, we should say, the last part of his practice. Buddha Shakyamuni practiced for eons and eons and eons, but the last part of his practice in that lifetime, 6 years, and then at the age of 35. So likewise, at the age of 35, Jigten Sumgon then achieved, after he finished his retreat, then he took full ordination, and knowing that this will encourage a large sangha to assemble around him. Knowing that this would encourage a large sangha to assemble around him, meaning that he decided, that he should no longer walk around and just have the appearance of a lay person, that it would be more beneficial for him to take full ordination as a monk. So then he went and received ordination from other teachers to become a fully ordained monk. In his biography, we also learned that the immediate incident that caused him to make this decision to become a monk was that when he attended a tantric feast, a Ganachakra feast, with a group of practitioners, the head lama that hosted that feast offering, he was not a monk. And so I think it said that one of his daughters was really attracted to Jigten Sumgon. And then seeing that Jigten Sumgon also wasn't a monk, then propositioned him and offered herself to him and said, let me be your sexual partner. And that really, left an impression in Jigten Sumgon and said, this is not good, if I continue to not, even though, like he basically, he kept the vows of a monk, except for, shaving head, wearing robes. He felt that, he doesn't want to perpetuate that misunderstanding, that, oh, somehow a great practitioner can do whatever he wants. And he said, look, even in this like Ganachakra feast, the daughter of the head lama came to proposition me and say, let me be your sexual partner. Then he's like, I need to, not create misunderstanding in other people's minds as to why I'm not a monk. And so then he took the vows of the monk. He studied the Vinaya and realized that a, quote, misdeed by rule, i.e., the prohibitions that the Buddha formulated, and a misdeed by nature, in other words, that which is prohibited by nature, such as killing, are actually not different. So these are, in Vinaya, there is the division of like natural misdeeds and misdeed by rule. So from Jigten Sumgon's understanding and the way he taught, he said, actually, both of these are the same, as both are prohibitions in accordance with the fundamental nature. And so we talked about the fundamental nature yesterday. And again, this is a very big topic. And again, all 197 statements are elaborations of this fundamental nature and how this fundamental nature works. So briefly here, what I can elaborate on here is that, yes, of course, in the Vinaya and in many places, through analysis, through looking at different texts, great Buddhist masters, teachers of the Vinaya and all that, finding different quotes from different parts, showed that the Buddha sometimes referred to some rules as rules based on a misdeed by nature and rules based on misdeed by rule. So misdeed by nature would be killing. So with or without a rule having been established, if you kill, there is negative consequences. There is negative karma. Misdeed by rule would be something like, according to this way of dividing these rules, saying, for example, amongst sitting cloth, for example. So among the things that a monk or nun can own and say, this is mine, is a sitting cloth. So there are some instructions on what material this sitting cloth can be made from, and also the size of this sitting cloth. and it says something like, I don't know very well the exact details. It says something like the sitting cloth should not be bigger than, on all sides, 4 fingers width. So that if the sitting cloth is more than 4 fingers width, then that is a misdeed based on the rule that has been established by the Buddha. So Jigten Sumgon here wants to say, now don't think that because this is a rule based, this is a misdeed based on rule, therefore it doesn't involve the 3 poisons. And don't think that because you have not made a promise to keep this rule, then you, say you lay people, can sit on a sitting cloth that is 4 feet width. He says, that would be wrong understanding of the fundamental nature. He says, how can it be that sitting on basically a sitting cloth or a sitting mat that is bigger than 4 fingers for a monk or nun has negative consequences, and sitting on a beyond 4 fingers wide sitting cloth on lay people, there is no negative consequences. Then he says, in that case, Buddha is not very nice, to the monks and nuns. He's putting, a different kind of burden on them. So here the commentary said, no, even as someone who has not taken the vow, there are consequences. There's karmic effect of sitting on such a fancy big rug. Slowly, slowly, it's this not enough mind, so to say. Grasping mind becomes stronger and stronger. And because you think it's so inconsequential, it's just a rug, I'm not attached to the rug. But then the habit of wanting nice things, the habit of overconsumption in the vocabulary that we use today, so easily form that we don't even think twice. And over time, grasping becomes stronger and stronger. So of course, it's also a misdeed. It's also an unskillful action. Likewise, like the rule of monks and nuns, having robes, basically 1 set of robes in 3 pieces, right? Then you say, oh, I'm not a monk, I can have a whole wardrobe of clothes, Of course, there's negative consequences to that. Yeah, of course, there's negative consequences to that, whether you have taken the vow of a monk or nun or not. So this is briefly what it means here. In detail, we're going to look at this later. Between 1177 and 1179, Densatil, Pangmu Densatil, the hermitage of Pamudrupa, was under Jigten Sumgon's direction. So he went back to Densatil, and again, they agreed, okay, you should lead this community. But his view of disciplined conduct did not sit well with many of the practitioners there. Since they insisted that as, quote, nephews of Milarepa, that means descendants of Milarepa, they should be allowed to drink alcohol and have wives. So he tried to reform them. he tried to say to them, no, 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 you cannot act like this. You cannot behave like this. This is not acceptable. But he could not, because bear in mind, many of them were senior to him too, So then he gave up. He left. He handed back the responsibility for the seat and moved on. In the following decades, he traveled, taught, and mediated conflicts and healed the sick. Together with Taklong Tangpa, one of the chief disciples of Pamadrupa, he took care of Pamadrupa's seat whenever necessary. So from time to time, he would come back. Because after Pamadrupa, Pamud and Satil was very rocky. Things went up, down, up, down, up, down. At one point, Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon took the library at Pamadrupa's seat at Densatil. Bear in mind, during that time, right, texts are very precious. There's no printing press. There's no Amazon.com. You order whatever you want if you have the money. Even if you don't have the money, you check. You charge it to your credit card, and then you worry about it later. During that time, books were really, really difficult to come by. So the collection that Pamadrupa collected over his lifetime, that was kept at his hut in Densatil. It said, we know that Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon basically took that whole collection and moved it to Dakla Gampo, Gampopa's monastery. Because he felt that the conditions at Densatil, Pamadrupa's place, was too unstable. He was very concerned that the text might be sold away, might be sold off. So he took this forcefully, in fact. We know this. There were a lot of objections. I think they said, like, in the middle of the night, he moved everything and took them to Gampopa's monastery, which presumably was much more stable at that time. Actually, it says here, it doesn't say in Sobish's report, but elsewhere in the early biography, we learn that his good friend and his senior fellow disciple of Pamadrupa, Taklong Tangpa, was so saddened by that action. In fact, it caused some kind of breach between them. Taklong Tangpa is the founder of Talong Kagyu. It said that it broke Taklong Tangpa's heart. Some accounts in the Talong Kagyu history said it even broke his heart, that then led eventually to Taklong Tangpa's death. So I am just being honest, reporting, what was going on then. My point in telling this is again to show that, it is never easy, even for such great beings, to try to do the right thing. It's never easy. You're going to disappoint people, even those who you're so close to, The fact of samsara is that sometimes, even when you know that you're doing the right thing, there's no way to have absolute certainty that everyone will agree, and much less those who don't agree with you already. So anyway, he did what he needed to do, and so this is one thing that he did. He also began to build a community in Drigong. So when he first left, the first time he left Densatil after the retreat, he then went to Drigong, which is in the northern part of central Tibet. Pamadrupa's monastery is in the southern part of central Tibet, close to the airport today, Lhasa Airport. But now he went north to this area called Drigong. And that's how the name Drigong Kagyu came to be, because eventually he settled in this area in Drigong. When he arrived in Drigong, it is said that there's already an existing small community of practitioners with some huts there. And apparently one of Pamadrupa's older disciple who came from eastern Tibet, already established his hermitage there, but he gave this to Jigten Sumgon. Presumably, he left and went back to eastern Tibet. But he gave this to Jigten Sumgon and said, you use my hut here. And so then, slowly, Jigten Sumgon, even as he traveled to other places, he kept returning to Drigung. And over time, a community formed there. When the number of disciples there reached 1,000, he sent many of them off to meditate in the solitude of Tsari, Lapchi, and Kailash. These are the 3 holy mountains in different parts of Tibet. Lapchi is close to the Nepal border. Tsari is in the south, way down in the south. And Kailash is way in the west. So he emphasized, you all need to go into retreat. You all need to go to these holy places and meditate. Later, the population of disciples in Drigung grew first to 13,000 and finally, as is claimed in some texts, to 80,000. So some exaggeration. So without saying that, politely say, as is claimed in some texts, to 80,000. But it's no exaggeration that lots and lots of people came to train with him. Karmapa was his teacher's generation. And in the first Karmapa's writings, he also said, this disciple of Pamodrupa, is gaining so many disciples. And so it is said up to 80,000. During his years in Drigung, Jigten Sumgon sent out 3 expeditions to the 3 places of solitude mentioned above, Tsari, Lapchi, and Kailash. On the occasion of the first expedition, which was headed by Geshe Ngepuwa, and must have occurred before 1303, groups of 80 people who had received instructions and the introduction to the nature of mind, and this is an important step in Mahamudra training, was sent to each of the 3 places. Jigten Sumgon said to them, and this could be read as a motto of his life thus far: sons, make efforts concerning your accomplishment in the mountain wilderness without attachment to the directions of phenomenal marks, or without attachment to the distractions of the phenomenal marks. Do not return before special experience and realization have arisen. If doubts and unpleasantness arise, supplicate the Guru. With endurance, make all suffering and deficiencies the path. Since all phenomena arise from the dependent origination of causes and conditions, take care regarding the dependent origination of cause and effect. Having said that, he sent them off. Most of them attained Siddhi, and some pass away, revealing the rainbow body. Since all phenomena arise from the dependent origination of causes and conditions, take care regarding the dependent origination of cause and result. This, of course, includes karma, includes 10 virtue, 10 non-virtue, and more subtle forms of virtuous and non-virtuous actions. Yes, definitely. But this goes beyond just what we conventionally consider to be matters about karma, cause and effect. In fact, in his other places, we see this is also talking about very subtle things that we do or don't do that might become a cause or a condition for some other result to arise at a later time. So for example, it said that when Milarepa first came to see Marpa, and without knowing that it was Marpa, he was looking for this great master called Marpa in this area. But while searching, he came across a farmer tilling his land. So he went up to the farmer and he said, I am looking for this great master called Marpa. Do you know where he is? So then this farmer said, no, I don't, but sit down, take a rest. You look exhausted. And so Milarepa sat down. Then Marpa poured out, a bowl of fermented barley. So beer. So then he poured out, a bowl of beer, and he gave Milarepa. And it is said that Milarepa immediately just drank all. Glub, 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 until the whole bowl was emptied. Then Marpa, because he understood, now this is the meaning too of interdependence of cause and effect, these subtle things. Later, Marpa told Milarepa, the fact that you did that and drank everything in one sip created the tendril, created the dependent origination, whereby you were able to completely receive all my instructions without error. So here when it says, dependent origination of causes and conditions, it covers things of this sort. So it is said that, for a master who has completely seen this process of cause and effect and the dependent nature of all things, it's said that for them, right, even when you put down something onto, like you put down your vajra and you put down your bell, even when you put down something like that, the way it is put down, the way it is put up, they all have created this web of interdependence. That a Buddha knows, what is the interdependence of putting down your phone, face down or face up. 1 centimeter to the left or 1 centimeter to the right. I mean, I'm using a kind of an extreme exaggeration, but that's the point, that they can see that. So here, right, when Jigten Sumgon says to them, you need to be careful, take care regarding the dependent origination of cause and effect. Of course, he's talking about karma. Of course, he's talking about the 10 non-virtues and the 10 non-virtues, how they arise and how they are purified. Of course, he's talking about that to them, but he's also talking about these more subtle things. Then you say, wait a minute, how do I know then what are the causes, cause and effect? What is the dependent origination? Well, some you know based on instructions that the teachers can give. I mean, not just any random teachers, like for us, like we can see some of these instructions given by Kyobpa Jigten Sumgon. I'll give you some example in a little bit. But to me, what this is saying is, as a practitioner, what we should develop over time is carefulness. Shantideva talks about this in his text. Careful introspection. Meaning we should not do anything, like even we should not even like move meaninglessly. Right? In the other famous text that Shantideva composed, Shiksha Samuchaya, which is the compendium of training. In there, it tells us all the different things that we should be careful about. Maybe in there or somewhere else, I don't remember, it says, you know, bodhisattvas, you know, bodhisattvas who are training are so careful that they would not even kind of meaninglessly, pointlessly, mindlessly pull a blade of grass. And I think, you know, how many times I have sat, you know, down on the ground and then just mindlessly, you know, just mindlessly just kind of pulling, decapitating grass. And if someone were to stop and say, hey, hun, what are you doing? If I'm honest, I have to say, oh, I don't know. Just, you know, mindlessly pulling there. In this training, it says, you know, that you have created some tendril. Maybe positive, maybe negative. Probably negative, because you're mindlessly doing something, not keeping awareness. This is not, you know, to make us paranoid about any little tiny thing we do or don't do. It's not going to work if you take these instructions this way. But this is saying, you know, every action of body, speech, and mind. The goal of our practice, of the gradual path of training, is to become more and more aware, and therefore reducing more and more, naturally reducing, not in a forced way, mindless and meaningless actions. Because especially if they're mindless and meaningless, then they create very subtle, unnecessary effects that at some point is going to ripen in a negative way, big or small. So to maintain vigilant, careful introspection, this is taking care regarding dependent origination of cause and effect. And sometimes it's given explicitly. So in some of the instructions Jigten Sumgon give about when you arrive at a place to begin a retreat, he says. If I remember correctly, one of the things he says, when you arrive at a place to start a retreat, and if that place is very attractive to you, the conditions, you go there and you go, oh my God, these conditions, they are so good, and this and that. He says, actually, you want to be a little bit more careful and not like, oh, wow, this is so great, this is so wonderful, you know. No, he said, just pull back a little. Practice some restraint. In other words, calm down your excitement. And instead, he says, acknowledge the lokapalas, the guardian of this local area, the owners of this local area. Bring them to mind and say to them, you know, thank you for this space. It feels good, it feels adequate for what I'm going to do here. And grant me this place for this period of time. So he says, you should mentally say, for a year or however long you want, a week, grant me this place for this period of time, at which point, when I have completed, I will leave. He said, that's an important tendril. So he explains, you know, if you become like too excited, oh, this is so great, this is so wonderful. And, you know, of course, in his time, there's no texting, you know. So now before you start your retreat, maybe you text everyone, oh, this is so great, this is so wonderful. You take pictures, you know, you send them, you're like, this is great, you know, wow, this will be wonderful. He say, that can be perceived by the local deities, the lokapalas, as some of them might take this as your it's like basically they will say, who are you, you know? Who invited you here? You suddenly come here and you act as if this is your place. Then they could cause obstacles. So he has lots of instructions like this, you know, that at the end of a retreat, when you leave a place, how you should leave it, your attitude, your mental attitude to it, all that. So he gives, so there are these types of instructions that are more explicit about Tendra. Yeah. So I think here today, we will stop here on page 9. Any questions, comments?
Han,
Yes.
when we are talking about fierce breathing, what is it, the one that they call it the moon and the sun breathing?
Oh, I don't know these things. Yeah, there are many, many names, you know, Tomo. There are many, many types. Many, many traditions of this sort of practices. Yes.
Can you
So
just
maybe it's called moon, sun, stars, planets. Who knows?
Can you just repeat again your dependent origination when you're saying there is like involving the 10 karmas, 10 virtuous, 10 non-virtuous, to when, you know, Mappa was offering the kind of beer,
Yes,
the kind
yes.
of price to Milarepa.
Mm-hmm.
How do you relate the whole thing?
You already related it, you know.
Like how?
Yeah, I said it includes, you know, what we normally consider as karma, how karma ripens. And it includes these subtle things that we cannot see so directly. It's about actions. It's about actions resulting in results. Actions that lead to results. It covers all of this, is my point. And like I said, the rest of this book is going to unpack all of this.
Thank you. I still don't understand it anyway.
That's why there's the rest of this book.
Okay.
I already said, you know, if I tell you everything now, then I'm out of business very soon. A good salesman, you know, knows to give just enough, you'll come back for the next product. No, joking aside, this is not, you know, something that you can just, oh, you hear one time, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. This is the, you know, it says the single intention, the unified intention, the complete intention of all Buddhists.
Then is it single intention and pointed mind is the same?
No. The other day I talked about, you know, the meaning of Gongchik, you know, why maybe we should keep it as Gongchik and not, you know, translate into single intention. And also saying, you know, he doesn't have a choice. Probably wisdom, his editor say, no, you should use single intention. At the very beginning, I talk about Khenchen Rinpoche's point, you know, why the topic here, the meaning of Gongchik is better to just say Gongchik. It's not just one point.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Lama.
Yes.
I was wondering if there is a specific page where there's the recommendations for what to do when entering and leaving retreat.
Not in this book. It's in his other instructions. In his Gambum, there is a collection of teachings called the Mountain Hermitage Teachings, where he gives instructions on people going into retreat and coming out of retreat, what to do, what not to do.
Okay.
We can talk later. You get in touch with me. I know you are in retreat, so.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Others? Comments? Hmm? Oh, not a question. Background sound. If not, then we should end today. I will send a few more pages, pictures that we will be looking at.
Thank you.
So, so at the end, a brief dedication of bodhicitta, which says, bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise. And where it has arisen, may it not decline, but may it grow stronger and stronger until we achieve Buddha. Changchu semcho rinpoche ma ge ba nam ge gyu ge ba nyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du sure. And I want to repeat, as I've said, according to Pedro Rinpoche, this great master of the 20th century, who taught the Bodhicitta many, many times to all parts of Tibetan society. Apparently, until Pedro Rinpoche did that, Bodhicitta is only taught to monks attending seminary, not even generally to all monks and nuns, only those attending seminary for the Geshe degree and all that. But Pedro Rinpoche, it said, went everywhere teaching this text to everybody. So also the style of teaching was more like experiential. The instructions that he gave wasn't so scholastic. So this great master, he said, in fact, you can understand this prayer. Right? He said you can understand this as basically talking about the entire book of Shantideva. He says, so the first 3 chapters, which is the chapter on the excellence of bodhicitta, confession, and taking hold of bodhicitta, corresponds to what you're saying in the first line of the prayer. Bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise. He says that covers the first 3 chapters, reminds us of the first 3 chapters of Shantideva. Then where it has arisen, may it not decline. And so how to make sure bodhicitta doesn't decline? You have to rely on chapter 4, 5, and 6 of Shantideva, which is the chapters on carefulness, vigilant introspection, and patience. Then the chapters on 7, 8, 9, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom is the line that says, the final line, and may it increase higher and higher until Buddhahood is achieved. And then dedication is the 10th chapter in Shantideva's text. So Buddha Rinpoche has a nice way of helping us remember even just the contents of the Bodhicitta. He says, every time you say, Changchu Semchu Rinpoche, Mage Panam Gyegyurji, Gyapa Nyamba Mepaya, Gongne Gongdu Pelwar Sho, you remember the contents of the Bodhicitta. as I say now, you know, my shipwrecked, in this case, pre-zombie apocalypse isolation, yeah, it would be Shantideva's Bodhicattva, then the 100,000 songs of Milarepa, and then now the Buddha's single intention. These are my 3 books, you know. So you can think, you know, what are your 3 Dharma books when you're shipwrecked? What are the 3 Dharma books, you know, that you will grab, you know? You're in the house, you know, it's burning, you know. What are the 3 books that you're going to grab, you know? So you think of that. Anyway, you have a good day. Please take care of yourself. Eat good food, meaning nutritious food. Exercise. Do Dharma practice. Be kind and forgiving to people that are around you if you are in isolation with other people. If you're not in isolation physically with other people, make sure you get enough contact with other people. Then if you are in isolation with other people, make sure you have enough patience and forgiveness for each other. Know that now, who is right and who is wrong is basically pointless and useless. The need to be right right now is completely useless. Especially, you know, it's possible we might die next week, next month, which is always true, you know, but we never really believed that. But now maybe easier to believe that. So if you're physically around other people, you know, you ask, you know, do you want your last week, last month, last year to be about I am right? Or do you want it to be we are all happy? We are all happy. So please remember that. And again, if you have time, if you are able to, join us tomorrow. This teaching on this weekend, this Friday night, I shared on the chat. This is on the Panashavari practice. So this Friday night, for those of you in the US, Eastern Standard Time is 9 p.m. If you're in Guatemala, it's 7 p.m. this Friday. If you're in Mexico, it's 8 p.m., I believe, this Friday night. If you have interest in the Panashavari practice, then please come. This is in a way a follow-up from what I did with the Malaysia group a week ago at the same time slot. So join us if you can. In any way, in any case, have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hasta
Bye-bye.
mañana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guru.